The heavy wooden door of cabin number 4 clicked securely shut, sealing out the freezing Manitoba wind. Jessie immediately adjusted the internal thermostat, establishing an optimal thermal baseline. They worked in synchronized movements to convert the primary sofa into a structured sleeping matrix, pulling the heavy cotton sheets tight to eliminate any unpredictable fabric folds. Knowing her auditory processing preferences, Jessie activated the television interface and navigated to the YouTube application. He curated a specific digital playlist designed for maximum comfort. A theatrical pantomime of Dick Whittington featuring an inexplicably loud Russian rat, followed by Let's Play videos where the creators performed distinct vocal alterations. They lay side by side on the converted bed, watching Markiplier navigate the pixelated caverns of Undertale and Jacksepticeye, explore the autumnal aesthetics of night in the woods. The localized warmth and the predictable, energetic voices of the famous YouTubers provided a flawless acoustic shield. They maintained wakefulness until exactly 3 a.m, their breathing eventually syncing with the digital dialogue as they drifted into a secure sleep. Sunlight fractured through the cabin blinds when Jessie finally woke at noon. He moved with deliberate quiet, brewing a dark roast coffee and sealing it within an insulated steel thermos to ensure the temperature remained structurally sound. He gently touched Kira's shoulder, using soft, rhythmic pressure to bring her out of her sleep cycle. They dressed in their heavy winter layers, executed the door-locking protocol, and walked to the car. The engine heater aggressively fought the sub-zero temperature. Before Jessie shifted the vehicle into drive, he retrieved a small, amber plastic cylinder from his heavy coat pocket. He held it up so she could visually process the label. "I have secured the emergency, fast-acting pharmaceutical override," Jessie stated smoothly, perfectly matching her required cadence. "If the external environment introduces an unmanageable variable today, or if you calculate that your spontaneous panic levels are escalating, you only need to request a pill." Kira studied the bottle, her round hazel eyes registering the safety net. "I will notify you immediately if my system requires the chemical intervention to face the external world." The short drive into the resort town center was acoustically controlled and visually pristine. They located Doug and Mary waiting on the snow-cleared sidewalk outside the rustic pastry shop. Kira initiated a calculated social algorithm, stepping forward to briefly, but firmly wrap her arms around Mary. It was a flawless execution of median greeting behavior. Jessie extended his hand to Doug, shaking it with a normal, friendly grip. "Hey man, good to see you," Jessie said warmly, dropping his precise vocabulary for the external audience. They entered the shop together. The interior was heavily insulated and smelled of frying oil and cinnamon. They approached the counter to request their caloric intake. Jessie and Kira both ordered the brownie beaver tail, prioritizing dense chocolate variables, while Doug requested his strawberry variation, and Mary chose the simple cinnamon and brown sugar. To supplement the pastries, they collectively agreed on a large order of poutine, heavily modified with chopped hot dog wieners and thick-cut bacon. They claimed a square wooden table tucked securely into the far corner of the dining area, naturally establishing a solid visual perimeter of the entrance. "I calculate that our temporal allocation last night functioned exactly like a free weekend," Kira stated, addressing the table with her clinical, melodic precision. "We successfully bypassed all standard responsibilities, prioritizing sustained wakefulness until our biological limits were reached." Jessie smiled naturally at Doug and Mary. "It was honestly perfect. We just stayed up all night watching British pantomimes and the 2 most famous YouTubers alive. Nothing beats crashing on a pull-out couch while hearing those voices in the background." Mary beamed across the table, her eyes darting between Jessie and Kira. It was abundantly clear to both Doug and Mary that this couple operated on an entirely synchronized frequency, effortlessly completing each other's complex emotional equations. They could clearly see that Jessie was a perfect structural firewall who made Kira's life complete, and that Kira provided the precise center of gravity Jessie required. "That sounds like a perfect night," Mary said gently. "Doug and I actually had a pretty great night when we first met, too. We ended up next to each other at a Weird Al concert." "Yeah, completely random luck," Doug added, laughing softly. "After the show, we were both buzzing, so I asked if I could walk her home. We had huge smiles on our faces the whole time. We took a detour to Dairy Queen for ice cream before finally heading back." Kira processed the data sequence, recognizing the structural integrity of their emotional foundation. "That sequence of events is highly romantic," she confirmed. "The integration of dairy-based sweets and synchronized walking constitutes a superior origin matrix." Jessie leaned back, resting his arm against the wooden chair. "I met Kira at Robin's Diner, right when I was at the absolute lowest point in my life. I was reeling from a massive betrayal with my ex-girlfriend. I was completely lost until I heard Kira singing an old Air Supply song while she was working. The second I heard her voice, everything just shifted. I fell in love right then." Mary pressed her hand to her chest. "That is beautiful. Kira, you literally saved him with a song." Kira looked at Jessie, her hazel eyes locking onto his brown ones. "Jessie has executed comprehensive rescue protocols for my baseline on numerous occasions. He has saved me many times." Just as the server approached their corner table with a heavy wooden tray loaded with steaming poutine and hot, flattened pastries, the bell above the shop's front door chimed aggressively. Jessie's peripheral vision caught the uncalibrated kinetic movement instantly. It was Marco. The skinny, leopard-haired man stomped the snow off his boots with exaggerated force, entirely oblivious to the two couples sitting in the far corner. Marco slumped into a booth near the register, pulling out his phone and sighing loudly to attract maximum attention from the lone cashier. Kira's internal threat detection grid spiked instantaneously. Her posture turned rigid, the atmospheric warmth of the shop suddenly feeling hostile and suffocating. She stared at the unverified variable disrupting her secure environment, then immediately turned her head to establish visual contact with her constant. "Jessie," Kira whispered, her voice dropping into a tight, urgent frequency. "I require the pill." Jessie didn't hesitate. He smoothly reached into his coat pocket, shielding the motion with his torso, and placed the small medication directly into her waiting hand. Kira placed the small tablet on her tongue and washed it down with a long, calculated sip of her icy Diet Coke. Almost immediately, the psychological fortification established itself within her neurological pathways. Her shoulders dropped their rigid tension, and her hazel eyes smoothly bypassed the booth where the erratic leopard-haired variable sat. She systematically re-engaged with the safe parameters of their corner table, allowing the medication to filter out the threat. The group turned their attention back to the heavy wooden tray between them. Jessie and Kira operated in perfect synchronization, efficiently processing the heavily modified poutine. The salty combination of thick-cut bacon and chopped hot dog wieners provided an optimal grounding texture for Kira, while the sharp carbonation of their sodas recalibrated their sensory inputs after the brief adrenaline spike. Doug and Mary ate their own portions happily, oblivious to the internal chemical adjustments Kira was managing. Mary wiped her mouth with a paper napkin and smiled warmly at the couple. "There are some really cute places just down the street," she suggested, gesturing toward the frosted window that looked out onto the snow-covered town. "They have all sorts of vacation stuff, like customized mugs and little stations where you can make your own charm bracelets. Oh, and there is a massive candy shop right next to it. Doug nodded, leaning in slightly over the table. We should probably all head over there together. Safety in numbers in this freezing weather, right? Plus, it is just more fun hanging out as a group. Jessie smiled at Doug, projecting a relaxed, median-friendly demeanor that completely masked his earlier hypervigilance. That sounds great, man. Honestly, it is really nice to have friends to do these things with. Kira paused her systematic consumption of a hot dog slice. She reached across the wooden table, her fingers deliberately wrapping around Jessie's hand to apply a steadying, reassuring physical pressure. She looked directly into his big brown eyes, allowing the corners of her mouth to lift into a genuine smile. I verify this statement, she said, her tone melodic and mathematically precise. I lacked the requisite data to understand that I needed friends in my operational grid until I successfully integrated you into my baseline, Jessie. I am right here with you, Jessie murmured softly, momentarily slipping into her exact cadence to reinforce their bond. Our parameters are perfectly aligned. Once the poutine was fully processed, they seamlessly transitioned to the beaver tails. Kira meticulously consumed her dense chocolate brownie variation, appreciating the predictable sweetness and structural integrity of the fried dough. After finishing, the group bundled back into their heavy winter layers, securing their scarves and hats, and stepped out into the freezing Manitoba air. They walked as a cohesive four-person unit down the snow-packed street, the biting wind easily deflected by their insulated coats. They entered a brightly lit souvenir shop that radiated intense artificial warmth. The aisles were packed tightly with tourist trinkets, heavy ceramic mugs, and plush teddy bears prominently embroidered with the Clear Lake logo. As Jessie navigated the narrow, cluttered walkways, his eyes caught a surprisingly extensive glass display case filled with elaborate glass water pipes. Though he maintained a strict zero-drug protocol for his own biological system, he found the structural designs entirely fascinating. The bongs were shaped into intricate, colorful homages to classic pop culture, featuring perfectly molded renditions of Sailor Moon, Hello Kitty, Batman, and the familiar muscular silhouette of He-Man from his old favorite cartoons. Jessie stepped away from the glass case and found a small workstation dedicated to custom jewelry assembly. He carefully selected a thin, durable gold chain and began threading gold-plated seashells onto it, ensuring the spacing between each shell was mathematically symmetrical, so it wouldn't irritate Kira's need for order. In the exact center of the sequence, he placed two small, polished letter charms, a J and a K. He presented the completed necklace to Kira, who analyzed its weight and symmetry before lifting her red-dyed hair, allowing him to fasten it securely around her neck. In return, Kira approached the ceramic display and selected two identical heavy mugs, one for her and one for Jessie, purchasing them to ensure their future domestic coffee routines remained structurally sound and perfectly balanced. The group then migrated to the adjacent candy shop. The air inside was thick with the overwhelming scent of processed sugar and artificial fruit flavoring. Kira immediately located the clear acrylic bulk dispensers and began filling a small paper bag with fuzzy peaches and brightly colored M and MS, carefully calculating the volume to prevent a sugar-induced metabolic spike. Jessie grabbed his own bag and moved to a neighboring dispenser. He scooped a generous portion of M and MS and was just reaching for the silver metal scoop embedded in a bin of blue gummy fishes when the kinetic environment suddenly shattered. Marco stepped directly into Jessie's personal space, his leopard print hair standing out aggressively against the pastel candy displays. "Why are you ignoring me, man?" Marco demanded loudly, his voice echoing off the plastic bins and drawing the confused attention of several median shoppers in the aisle. Jessie froze his physical movements, locking down his emotional response grid instantly. He looked at Marco with absolute cold neutrality, projecting a wall of pure apathy. "I do not want anything to do with my past," Jessie stated clearly, ensuring his voice remained perfectly level for the public setting. "You are not a part of my life." Marco sneered, leaning in closer, trying to force an emotional reaction. "What, you think you are too good for me now? You think you are better than me?" "I have a completely new life," Jessie replied, not shifting an inch to give ground. "And I have a new girlfriend. There is no place for you here." Kira registered the escalating decibels and the hostile variable directly threatening her constant. She stepped slightly forward, maintaining a rigid, clinical posture to maximize her internal stability. She looked at Jessie, completely ignoring Marco's existence. "Jessie, I calculate that as soon as we return to the resort perimeter, we can initiate a swimming sequence in the aquatic center." Marco's head snapped toward Kira. He registered her precise, robotic tone and immediately distorted his own face into a mocking, ugly grimace. He began jerking his arms and torso in exaggerated mechanical movements, loudly mimicking a malfunctioning robot to insult her neurological processing. The absolute firewall protocol engaged instantly. Jessie stepped squarely between Kira and Marco, using his slim but solid build to completely sever Marco's line of sight to Kira, physically blocking the hostile mimicry. "The way you are treating my new girlfriend right now," Jessie said, his voice dropping into a dangerous, icy register that carried no warmth, "is exactly the reason why I want absolutely nothing to do with you. You are acting like a petulant kid in kindergarten. Grow up." Without waiting for a response or a counterargument, Jessie placed a gentle, guiding hand on Kira's lower back. He nodded sharply to Doug and Mary, who were watching the exchange with wide eyes, and the four of them seamlessly exited the candy shop, leaving the hostile variable contained behind the glass doors. Marco stood stunned in the candy aisle for a few seconds before his bruised ego forced him into motion. He shoved the heavy door open and followed them onto the snowy sidewalk, shouting into the freezing wind. "Yeah, just walk away," Marco yelled bitterly, his voice cracking against the winter air. "Look at the big man on campus, just leaving me behind like you always do." Jessie and Kira maintained their forward velocity, their synchronized footsteps crunching rhythmically against the ice. They completely ignored the hostile audio input fading behind them, successfully navigating back to the secure perimeter of the resort. Within minutes, they had changed into their swimwear and walked into the humid aquatic center. The pool was heavily populated with splashing, screaming children, a chaotic variable that would normally require intense mitigation. But as Kira slipped into the chemically treated water, and Jessie moved perfectly beside her, acting as her anchor and shielding her from the kinetic impacts, the noise simply faded into the background. Their operational bubble remained entirely secure, unbroken by the past or the present chaos.